I think I want fellow nomads, right? That are willing
Yeah,
to bounce around from, and not like what is that? I guess mental nomads that are willing to
I like that.
move around from idea space to idea space and try to look at things from different points of view and
Well, it's like they can go to the Jehovah's Witness lecture, but not become a Jehovah's Witness, and then they can
mhm.
go to the Buddhist monastery, but not necessarily become Buddhist, and then they do, and so on and so on and so on, and then they reach enlightenment, right? Like because you've taken the best of what suits you from so many different disciplines in the
Mhm.
world. Welcome to Unqualified Advice, the show where we try to make sense of business, investing, and life with just enough experience to get ourselves in trouble.
I'm Sean, and he's Dan. We both started different careers. Dan in IT, climbing the ranks to Chief Technology Officer in New York, and me in manufacturing, managing production quality across 3 countries.
At some point, we both decided we didn't know enough. So we went back to school for our MBAs. Me at Columbia Business School, and Sean at the University of Houston downtown.
And after all that, we figured the best way to share what we've learned and what we're still figuring out is to start a podcast.
So, if you like deep dives into decision making, business strategy, and the occasional half baked investing theory,
Or just enjoy listening to two guys challenge each other's ideas and occasionally admit when we're wrong,
you're in the right place. Welcome to Unqualified Advice. Morning, Sean.
good morning, Dan. I am sitting over here
Bushy-tailed?
enjoying, but bright-eyed, bushy-tails, enjoying my thermos of coffee. So if you hear me curse in the background, it's because I accidentally burnt myself.
I thought you were going to say because I ran out.
How are you doing this morning, Dan?
I'm trying to hold on. We've been experimenting with pricing, and also like there are super opaque things in the marketplace of like, is the consumer already feeling weakness, or are they protecting their pocketbook early? Anyway, volume, traffic, all the things that are important to keeping the business alive are down, and yeah, it doesn't feel good, combined with the complete and absolute uncertainty about like what is going on and what the plan is.
Mm-hmm.
So, as much as I would like to tell you that we will not touch politics or even think about it in any way, it is basically 90% of my life now, I think. And so I end up talking about it. Last night, Howard Lutnick was in one of my dreams. I don't remember the dream. I'm not very good at remembering dreams, but I know he was there. And that to me is completely terrible and fucked up. I don't want him there.
Maybe he was trying to incept you.
Yeah, to the non grown-ups in the room, trying to take, it's like maybe I was aligning myself with Scott Bessent or something like that, and then Howard Lutnick comes in, he's like, Peter Ritardo and I over here. I don't know, man.
I have to say,
I don't have opinions.
I have to say, I have to say, in my headspace, that is very much a current. Like I'm not going to be able to avoid it either. A lot of what we have done recently at work and what we have found out we're going to be doing for the next year or two has been directly impacted by the tariff and trade policy and the uncertainty of what is going on. We are definitely looking at changing changing what had been expecting to be working on to different things at this point, because we have to make some quick pivots and to try to mitigate the impact of certain items that are going to cost more if we keep them sourced where they currently are versus trying to find new homes for them. So
Can you talk about like you're like I have zero industrial capacity, right? Like there's no option for me. It's like source from China, source from Vietnam, source from somewhere. Someone's got to make stuff for me because it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little microscopic business, and there's no way that it's impossible. You can't go build a $7.5 million factory in order to make $1 million in revenue, right? Like it's not how it works. But like you guys do have industrial capacity. You have welders and tradespeople and stuff that you actually do and make here on the ground in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about like what a 30% tariff in China would do, what a 65% tariff in China would do to your guys' production, and sort of like how you're shaping up that next year project?
Let me say this. So we have a manufacturing capacity globally. We have a center in China, a couple of centers in China that manufacture components or that source components locally manufactured and put them in an assembly, and then ship them out. A lot of those parts actually come to the United States, and so those items are up potentially for a 200% tariff on certain, depending upon how the impact stack. At a 200% level, we are very competitive locally, I will say. However, I don't know what that does to the rest of to the actual end use market. So, would it be a more work from a shrinking pie situation? So we are actively in SLB looking at our global sourcing practices and saying, should we make more things closer to the basin where they're being used? We refer to different areas as basins because of their geological basins. And so we're looking at trying to say more manufacturing of different items in different locations and rationalizing what items are being manufactured in which countries globally.
I guess from maybe a listener standpoint, like it could be, maybe it's somewhat obvious that there's going to be a reshuffling, but what would you, if you were to place a bet in terms of value capture, where's the value capture moving from and to? Is it does this rebalancing move more value capture to the United States in a meaningful way, or is it just
I
it's
think,
a lot of productivity and
well,
wasted and like brain cycles to just do stuff?
I think it depends upon the products. And one thing about our products is we are not incredibly high volume. Um, a large number
Which I
of
think is, you're going to find like those,
a large
that's what
number of
matters.
units a large number of units made for us in a year of certain product lines might range from let me think of one of our mid-tier products would be 6,000 to 15,000 units in a year, like at the high end volumes on a lot of these. There are certain things that it's in the tens of thousands that are very small components used frequently over in other components and other assemblies. But for the most part, any finished assemblies we're making are on the orders of magnitude of thousands in a given year, sometimes tens of thousands. So at those volumes, our shops and capacity in America for us with our, obviously there's a different labor rate. There are different
Compliance
utility
costs.
rates. There are different compliance costs. The overall, burden rate of what we have to pay per hour here, and making these finished products with tariffs on still the raw inputs, right? We're not
Yep.
getting the inputs tariff free, so we still have a tariff on those. We believe some of our domestic manufacturing, we start to see it being making sense for us to do it here in the 30, 40, 50% range, depending upon the product. So depending upon where the tariffs land, which we don't know, it seems like it's going to be in that range where for a lot of these products, again, they're not super high volume items. We'll see what then again, the end market might decline because of the increased cost overall, because that's just because we're competitive doesn't mean that it's still will be the cheapest on the market at that point. We don't know that, or that at that price point that what the level of activity will be, because the cost to drill,
Yeah.
their cogs just went up, so
Yeah. If
they're
the rest
not
of
going
the
to want
economy
to.
has hurt.
Yeah, if the rest of the economy
Yeah.
is hurt, or if a barrel of oil hasn't gone up 30% correspondingly, then we don't know how all that's going to work out through the system and how it's going to reach new equilibrium. But it's definitely changing.
Yeah, definitely changing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the perspective is like, well, if the economy is here and then the tariff goes here equals this, and it's like, well, the tariff went up and therefore should expect the economy to go down, and then that leaves even less. And it's like, if you needed $1 of revenue to pay all your bills, then I'd say double it. But if the economy weakens, doubling your revenue is going to be pretty hard.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Then you have to take market share, right? And the only way to do
Well,
that is by
then we go back to payrolls.
then we go back to payroll. Yeah.
Payroll
So
is the economy, and it's going to get decimated. I think yeah.
Yeah,
I am having a hard time not coming back to that part of the equation.
and I would imagine that's because you have. Do you actually have product on water right now?
Yeah. Well,
So
it might have gotten unloaded. I don't know. I'll find out tomorrow.
okay. So and you don't know what that means for you at this point.
No,
It
it's
might
very
get unloaded tomorrow,
unclear.
and you still
I
don't know
can
what it
stab a I
means.
think I can stab a pretty good educated guess on what it's going to be, but given how like not written down the rules seem to be, who knows?
Who knows? That to me would just I would not be sleeping all weekend because I would be sitting there worried about am I going to get a bill for this or for this? And
Yeah, I think
if
like I
the
had said last time, I think there's going to be a whole lot of not mine. I don't think, but I think there's a whole bunch of product that's just going to go straight to landfill. It's going to be brand new stuff that got shipped in and it goes to landfill because people don't have the American businesses don't have the cash to pay the duty,
yeah, I
which is
mean
crazy.
the amount of working capital increase
You,
that is required for this is just insane.
yeah, you're really quiet, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'll
Yeah,
scoot up. Is that better?
that's better.
Okay, yeah. It's the amount of the increase in working capital is insane on all of this. You have to have so much more cash flow to be able to make it work. I mean, even if you end up still selling at the same margin, your cash flow is going to just be absolutely decimated until everything reaches new equilibrium.
So if we do some level of austerity like Doge and some and we fire a bunch of people and there's less money moving around the economy because of that and you cancel so many contracts at all the consulting firms that another 100,000 high earners are let go, like if you visualize this within the economy, and yet with tariffs you're basically saying to all American small businesses like you've got to grow in order to just survive at the level that you've gotten accustomed to. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It'll probably because it'll still be depressed from what people have gotten accustomed to. They've got to grow the business just to like not shut down. uh I don't understand how that equation balances.
Yeah, I don't see how it does. It's
Yeah.
not. I just don't see how you do get a balance ever off of it. It seems as though I don't know. It doesn't. Dan,
It,
Dan,
yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
trying to like I just keep playing with the idea because I'm trying to find the path through,
Mm-hmm.
but it just does not. So I mean, anyway, this I left a thing in our notes that maybe now's the time to move to it, and
Yeah, I think
all I
this
put
is. I think this is the moment.
all I put in was asymptotic society, and moving asymptotically is like towards infinity, right? Like it's moving towards a destination that you never actually reach. And my thought here, my armchair quarterbacking thought here is we are asymptotic as a species in that every time things get good, we have to go mess it up. And this feels like one of those times. Not that everything was perfect, but
Mm-hmm.
perfect is not reachable. You will never get there. But things were clicking along pretty good. And then that meme where like the kid's riding the bike and then and it's just like him holding a stick, and then this next frame is him putting the stick in the spokes, and then the third is him like crashed on the ground.
Yes,
That
that's very
exemplifies
much.
like the past 4 months.
I think that is the meme of 2025. Honestly, that's what it feels like in many ways between what the policies that have gone in,
Communication, planning.
how they've been implemented, what the I think the absolute impact to our credibility with the
Yeah.
world has taken, the hit that's taken. Um, People aren't going to be able to reliably plan to build a facility here in the United States at the moment because I don't know what's going to come in 6 months. Is this all backed off completely at this point? It's been so up and down that I don't think it's going to have any meaningful impacts at a very large scale. I think there were certain spaces that will benefit where there's already existing capacity that might be underutilized. There will be, some capacity that was being brought online, maybe being trying to expedited. But
Yeah.
as far as new facility builds and
Let's
new capacity coming online,
let's
I
play with
don't.
this a little bit.
Okay.
If let's grant the executive too many powers, and he gets this wish. The Federal Reserve is no longer independent, or at least is a puppet state for a while. And they take rates from whatever they are, the federal Fed funds rate to for whatever to 2.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, the way the economy was sort of like working and incentivized, most money just went into risk assets and to things that like maybe mathematically just didn't make sense or would have never made sense if money weren't free. But we
Mm-hmm.
went through a period where money was free.
Mm-hmm.
If tariffs were to remain 40 or above, does that change and these rates, the internal rates come down? Does that incentivize the kind of investment that they say is needed? Yeah, I think it would be good, largely good for the country too, but like actual building, actual infrastructure, private infrastructure rather than just more stock market, more Bitcoin, more, you know what I mean? Would it
That
just
made
flow to risk assets again, or would it be a different kind of risk assets? Talking again about like, well, a $1 million revenue business that's maybe taking home 200 grand, if your margins are good,
mm-hmm.
is not going to be able to afford to erect, buy the land, erect the factory, fill it with machines, fill it with labor. Like that's not in the cards for a business that size, right? So
No,
you
no.
you have to either pool and share, or take on like a massive SBA loan or something in order to like make that happen, right? And hope that you can grow the business. Anyway, like would those kinds of risks be taken? I wonder.
That yeah. So your theory being that if
Like right now, there's
because
so much uncertainty. If you were to turn the uncertainty down just a little bit and say like it's 40% across the board, doesn't matter where you're getting your stuff.
yeah.
Or maybe let's say it's like a little bit more targeted, makes more sense, right? Like that, so that
Mm-hmm.
we remove some of the non-linearity of the tariffs because reasons. Um,
Yes.
uh, but we basically made money free again.
Okay. Then so
Uh,
then does basically where does that easy money that you can get from very low interest rate loans and or uh, other stimulus that might be coming with that, like depending
because if all your
upon.
labor in manufacturing is also super cheap because you've chose China or India or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but now all of a sudden that is artificially inflated.
If you, I mean, ultimately, if you had something that people felt like that was a stable long-term outcome and that's what to expect, then I think
Yeah,
yes, that in that
you'd need Congress
situation,
to act,
yeah, exactly.
set a law.
It,
Yeah.
it if you were able to set up a stable like situation where that was a stable expectation, then yes, absolutely. I think on some level, certain types of businesses would try to certain people would start looking at building more locally. I think. However, you said something interesting about risk assets. So why, like in previous times, a lot of money is piled into risk assets during that. So why would they not pile into risk assets in that state and instead into a lower yielding capital investment in because the margins you're going to get
Well,
off of most manufacturing facilities are going to be much lower than much lower gross margin than a lot of businesses you could invest in the S&P 500 in many situations. I don't know.
yeah.
Not necessarily
I guess
though.
I'm looking at it from the standpoint of like uh, going back to your statement about needing stability, kind of like knowing that this is the plan going forward for a longer period of time. I think you'd have to have that because if
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long this free money regime is going to last, then my risk asset of choice is going to be liquid. Factory is not liquid. Real
Yeah.
estate is not particularly liquid. Um, but if I knew that this was going to be the future in the United States economy for the next 20, 25 years, then I could go, like risk on for the next 10 and then bank that ladder 10, ladder 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, big cash outlay to go build the thing. And then yeah, your margins aren't great, but you have basically no taxes now because you're going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
shelter those inside of all kinds of depreciation and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Does that make your take home? And then you've got this real asset in the United States.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and for certain size businesses, that will certainly make sense. Like you said, I wonder at what size it
It
starts to make
doesn't work
sense
for
because
me.
it doesn't work for the person doing $1 million in revenue every year. At 10 million, I mean, it, I think you'd have to be talking about businesses that are like probably in the close to triple digits, like at least 100 million revenue, before you'd start to say that
It
probably
speaks
makes
about
sense.
how expensive things are here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Also, you have to find a place to do it where people know how to build the
Yeah.
equipment
I mean,
or
at 4%
the
unemployment.
tooling. Yeah, so it would be it will be certainly possible, and probably you'll see expansion of certain manufacturing bases that are already kind of present, right? And some of those mid-sized existing companies already have the footprint expanding more so than new businesses coming up from whole cloth. But
Agreed. I also think you do have like I think of like a service center model, right? Like
yeah,
kind of how my supplements business works, right? Like almost no
hmm
supplement companies make their own supplements. Like not very many at all. Because it's so expensive. Compliance costs are insane. And you know, so we go to other people who specialize just in manufacturing. That's the only thing they do, and they do it for hundreds, if not thousands, of brands. And they've got all the compliance, they've got the labs, they've got the testing, the scientists, and so on and so
hmm
forth. So you know, it's fine. Like you know, people will be like, "Well, I really want a neuroscientist to own the supplement company that I buy from." It's like you have no idea what like even some small brands, as long as they're going through some rigorous third party testing, you'd be surprised at how highly executed things are. The marketing is a
I
different thing.
I'm not surprised actually. I think because I think there's enough regulation in that space to have created that need for those things to develop, and
Yeah.
over time it makes sense that that ecosystem has been something that developed.
And it's a litigious society, so
Yeah,
you tend to steer toward clear paths.
yeah. Steer towards de-risking what you're doing by going through well regulated,
Above
well
board.
approved,
Yeah.
well inspected above board, yeah, companies
Yeah.
that can prove it. Um, uh, yeah, and honestly, you could have a situation where somebody maybe smaller sized or mid sized shops building up that service um, kind of parts by type that you used to see. If you go around Detroit, you'll see a lot of, you used to at least, a lot of like stamping houses where it's not that they're making, any one product for themselves. They're just doing,
Yeah.
turning sheet metal stamp to make it to different
For
shapes and
Studebaker and Ford and
yeah, and a bunch of, it's like, oh, I'm making all the stampings for all these companies. So there, you might see things of that where it's we are good at this one task, and we are a shop that does that. So send us all your work.
I could
Uh,
get behind that. Like well, I mean, of course I could, but like the whole dang it, the term just left me. Like comparative advantage, right? Like that's one of the beauties
mm-hmm,
of
mm-hmm,
globalization is that every country, location, whatever you want to call it, can like specialize into something that they aim to get good at or already good at, or just geographically advantageous things are there for them. Um, versus like the United States trying to do things that we're not good at and aren't set up for, and labor costs are too high, or it's like you're trying to force a solution onto something that like doesn't math.
yeah, yeah. That very very much you're
But
trying to
like
force a solution without understanding the fully available inputs. I feel.
yeah,
And it's like, oh yeah, well that'll develop. And it's like, will it? What
will it?
tells you that that will be able to develop there in a fruitful way?
The other thing that I think about a lot is how this is like a contested sort of space, but after the GFC they did crazy stimulus sort of in the system,
Mm,
but they didn't get really any stimulus down to the people. And then with COVID, it was completely different. One, the body politic had changed, but they got more stimulus to the people, and also the outcome of COVID was not at all related to how the GFC went. But you couldn't see that. You can't see the future, so they did what they could in order to like not let things implode. But with the GFC, like you look at almost any graph out of Fred, and it's like that recovery was like a decade. Whether you're looking at housing starts or it's just like so many different numbers, it was like a decade long recovery. And
yeah, it was weird that we went from this. I feel like the recovery, it was never over, and then all of a sudden it was really good. It was just like we went from being like, oh, we're still stuck in this.
Well, the money got free.
Wait, yeah. Then I think once interest rates really started to come down, I could refi my home 6 times in 5 years. That's when I think I really started to feel like, we're through that finally. That was 2015, 16, I guess.
Yeah, something like that.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, now I think about this whole transition that is trying, like, basically it's like a cram down, right? And since it's not particularly strategic or tactical or specific, I kind of look at the possibility is if there's no sort of about face around any of this, then the next decade plus is hard. And I don't mean like, oh, woe is me sort of things. It gets darker.
There's structural issues, essentially.
Yeah, like 2009, 2010, these were not good years for big swaths of the country. And I think it's going to be similar here.
I remember that being a particularly stressful period. I mean, the company I was working for at the time had declared bankruptcy, and living through my first rounds of layoffs as a professional person, it was a gross feeling, and looking to find new work was a challenge. I knew a lot of people that I were graduating with that were having I do wonder, what are today's graduates seeing? How are they feeling? What are they saying right now about what the job market looks like? I wonder if this year's graduates that are going to be coming out here in just a couple of weeks, are they having a harder time than last year's?
You know what the number one aspirational job is?
No, what?
YouTuber.
All right. I wouldn't consider it a job, but I guess I guess people just want to be able to be paid to be on YouTube. Hey, I mean, what are we doing here, Dan? I guess like we're doing this
getting paid.
Not getting paid. Yeah, I've not considered this to be part of a job. It was
we're trying to share.
Yeah, this is.
Well, I think that's
fun.
to me. That's what's interesting. It's like making it as a YouTuber. I think has a lot less to do with wanting to be a YouTuber and having a lot more to do with gaining some life experience and having a perspective and then sharing that. And so coming straight out of college to be a YouTuber, I mean, while there are some, or people who didn't even go to college, break through, it's exceedingly rare. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to drop out of Harvard because I'm the next Mark Zuckerberg. It's like, well, there's like a 0.0001 chance.
Though. You have to build something. You don't just go use somebody else's platform and you'd have to go build a new platform. And then you can be Zuck. Although he might be forced to spin off Instagram or WhatsApp, so maybe you can buy one of those from him if you have a few 100 billion laying around.
100 billion, yeah, exactly. Well, as soon as that free money starts rolling around again,
it's an interesting. And all that's an interesting. Coming back to our kind of original, asymptotic society idea, and that we have a way of just never getting to where we think we're going to go. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Dan.
You there?
Yeah. Well, I was to draw this to loop this back to how we kind of got here with your idea of an asymptotic society. Like when I think of an asymptote, it's because things are going, you're skyrocketing, going so good, but like you're going to infinity, right? You can't ever get there because it's just so far away as well. It almost feels like, what was I going to say? It's almost like it's like a higher order function where it instead of being like a square, it's like a cube or a power of five function. Where so when you're zoomed in on a portion of the graph, it looks like it's an asymptote, but then what's actually going on is it's a higher order function with to a third or fifth power. So then you get like the it goes from being an asymptote to, oh, shit just happened, things slope over and it goes down for a while, and then it comes back up and then it comes back down, and the trend line is up and down, up and down. And looking out over time, like in the grand scheme of like billions, then it's ultimately maybe asymptotic or going up. But on any more smaller time scale, you actually, I don't know.
That sounds accurate, because like, is today better than in 1650? Well, certainly, right?
Yeah.
Like there have been they're like these local maximas, and then
Now we're just in that point where we have to go through a little decline. Maybe. I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I was gonna say it's not set in stone yet. Like,
No,
you listen to us today, and you could probably paint us both as with a dim view of the immediate future, and I would agree that is my view right now. But like, I'm willing to change that perspective tomorrow. Should one person change their mind?
Yeah, things happen. We don't know
Things
why
happen.
they happen, but things can happen, and none of
Did
this,
you see a
none of this has
little
to be.
interview / speech on stage Ken Griffin gave recently?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
He
So for
he
people unfamiliar, King Griffin is like perhaps the richest and most successful hedge fund manager in history. One of them, maybe like just below Rentec. And he founded and runs Citadel, which is now a litany of financial services businesses. And he was a huge, like, mega Republican donor this past cycle. And he just gave a speech of like, well, we are, these tariff moves have ruined America's brand. He thinks, we've sort of like killed 20% of our worth, which is a staggering sum if you really think about that math, and that we need to reverse course like pronto. Post haste. How many other, like, it's just basically like right now, like you should just call it a shot. This was completely dumb, and I'm putting words in his mouth now, but like,
no,
he
you are,
seemed
but
pretty sure of himself.
yeah,
And I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, I was happy to see him saying that because knowing that he had been, a staunch supporter at one point, or maybe
Ken
not staunch,
Griffin,
but a
Jamie
supporter.
Dimon.
Yeah, you have the big boys coming out and saying, "Hey, you got to put brakes on this policy because you are
value destructive.
effing up the system. Yeah, you're destroying value. You're not doing this in a way that is going to work."
This doesn't feel like creative destruction, right? Like, again, with creative destruction, it's like I might not want it or choose it because it does equal pain, but you get somewhere with it. And maybe I'm just not indoctrinated though, because like I talk to other people and they're clearly like, no, this is. And I'm like, hey, I don't think so. But
yeah, I don't. I maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It's very possible. It just from what I see in my experience and I guess my perspective, my lens, the way I process it, it feels almost
and
entirely
education
destructive.
and study of history.
Yeah.
Like I think sometimes we, you and I probably both are a little bit more like willing to give space to the other idea because we are willing to change our own minds and hear other perspectives. I think most of the time I'm probably pretty. I can probably get rigid every so often, but with
we all have our lanes.
Yeah, with that, I think it's hard. We don't always stand our ground on the fact that like we're not just total armchair quarterbacks that know nothing and just have like a perspective from watching TV news all day.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's mean.
I mean, well, that's a stereotype, and that's like 3% of people or 2% of people, right? There's actually not that many people that are out there that fit that armchair quarterback.
Okay, well, let's let another idea to play with then. There's something I've been struggling with in my mind because I'm trying to like one, be open-minded and kind and give space to these things that like I think I fundamentally disagree with. If I were to say something about the technicalities of horizontal drilling in the oil space
Mm-hmm.
to someone who knows nothing about it, they might very well say like, I just don't know anything about that, so I don't know that I have an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But if I ask them about tariffs, then they have an opinion, even though they've read zero history on it and have forgotten anything that they've learned from maybe high school was the last time they had any touch of policies like this. And how much were any of us really paying attention to like the visualization in our heads of what an economy is? It's an extremely chaotic, complex system.
Mm-hmm. But
So I struggle with why we can so profoundly have opinions around certain places. You said staying, the lane thing.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's completely sad that one has to stay in their lane, but they'll happily do so in certain areas and then happily just like go anywhere in others, even though they, you know,
It's about what feels important to them, or what part of what if it's been taken up as part of their teams, or
yeah,
like a
identity.
subgroups religion and identity, then they're going to have an opinion about it. Like you made a comment there about, well, I don't know much about the technicalities of horizontal drilling, so I would maybe say I don't have an opinion. But there are some people in some subgroups that same thing, but would very much say, oh, I have an opinion, and let me tell you that fuck you, get out of this house, I don't want to hang out with you. It's like, oh, okay, well, my bad, I'll just scoot along. So there are definitely, it
That's never
happens,
happened,
like,
Sean. It's never happened.
no, no, I mean, people aren't that, but like I've
No,
gotten,
it's an exaggeration of a thing that's
yeah,
real.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's universal, but it's what's important to some subgroup. And like, if you don't have an opinion about it, actually, you're probably more likely to make an informed
I agree.
judgment ultimately, because you haven't been pre-fed a bunch of things that may or may not be true. It's not what you don't know; it's what you know that just ain't so, as
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain said.
Yeah, one of the guys I used to work for started off every letter with that quote.
It's a good one.
It's
I
a very
brought
good
it up
one.
at work a couple of times this week, actually,
Yeah,
in some
which
moments of
is why,
uncertainty.
like, right here with you, like, several times, like, just trying to like take a thing that I think is absolutely dumb and say, like, what if we twist this? What if we look through this other lens? Can it work this way? Okay, I'm trying to
Yes.
be open and play with these things because, like, or it's not even that I'm trying to find a place of agreement. I'm trying to find a place of prosperity. Like, I'm trying to find a way through. I'm willing to travel with a group that, like, I don't identify with if we can all get to a good place.
I think I want fellow nomads, right? That are willing
Yeah,
to bounce around from, and not like, what is that? I guess mental nomads, that are willing to
I like that.
move around from idea space to idea space, and try to look at things from different points of view, or without necessarily being everything. Desert sands are always changing the shape of the landscape around you.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's like they can go to the Jehovah's Witness lecture, but not become a Jehovah's Witness, and then they can
mhm.
go to the Buddhist monastery, but not necessarily become Buddhist, and then they do, and so on and so on and so on, and then they reach enlightenment, right? Like because you've taken the best of what suits you from so many different disciplines in the
Mhm.
world, and I'm just picking on
Yeah,
some examples, I guess.
it's like a fund of funds in a way. No, no, but I think this is maybe a good point, actually, as we're discussing this, to maybe talk a little bit about one thing we're trying to do around here for a little pod housekeeping, for everybody. So we've been getting some feedback from some listeners, and thinking about how to, what is our purpose here, Dan? Why do we do this show? Between Dan and I, we have two very different backgrounds. We've decided, like, we really want to steer the show through the lenses of those backgrounds and our current places in life. Myself being more working in a large scale corporation where we have a lot of bureaucratic policy. I am not eating what I kill, unlike Dan, who is coming at it from a much a small business side, and having, worked in finance, but now out there doing his own thing. And, what we hope to bring about from that is, Dan, I'm not sure why are we doing this?
It's I think it's just through the lens of entrepreneurship, both like the practice of and the aspiration for. I think back through my history, and it's like, I remember in high school days trying to figure out like, how can I do a thing that like I was mowing lawns and I hated it. So like, is there something else that I can do that I actually do like and am good at that isn't a job? But then, necessity, and also young people should go get experience. So I got a job, and it was awesome. And then I went back to trying to figure out a way to do it my way, and on my own. So I think it's that partly is that journey, and informed by where I am today and all the different struggles and the things, the litany of reasons you may not choose this path. And then from, I think when we were talking about this, you were saying like, I tried and it didn't quite go the way I had hoped or planned, and there might be another, there's probably going to be another try in the future. You don't quite know where what that looks like today, but it's this aspiration, this willingness to try,
Yes,
that I think is important. This journey
aspiration towards entrepreneurship. I think that is very much why we started having even these discussions together, was that we were both, you were on the path and I was trying to get on the path. And I think that there's been a lot of things I've learned from my experience, getting on and stepping back off, or never really offloading, I guess, or off ramping fully. I feel as though it was a huge growth for me personally, and I think that the things that you've shared with me as I was working on that path, Dan, were valuable. And I think that's why I want to be here, sharing these ideas, having these ideas, these discussions with you, and then sharing them with others, because just the process of talking through how you approach running your own small business with somebody is hugely beneficial for when you're in that headspace of uncertainty and not knowing what's the next thing that's coming. You grow so much through the act of just talking it out, in a way.
I do a lot of processing by talking it out, and I think you've, dear listener, have heard it happen on air a few times. It's like I get halfway through an idea and I'm like, and I actually don't like this idea now that I'm hearing it out loud. And then it happens. And so, yeah, it's therapeutic and also just terribly valuable to be able to talk things out. And going back to, trying to make something out of nothing, whether you go and acquire a business and then run it, or start something from nothing, like it is incredibly lonely. And there are ways to, help with that. But one of them is conversations right here like this. And I think one of the beauties of this medium, podcasting and YouTube, all the things, is a lot more of this is now out in the open, whereas it used to be behind closed doors exclusively. And so getting access to it was really hard. So the other thing that's always on my mind with this is like, can you get to younger people who aspire? It doesn't even have to be younger. Can you get to other people that aspire to these things? And then it triggers like a rabbit hole, whether they stick with us or move on or like find some other path. It doesn't really matter, but like, can we trigger more creativity, spontaneity, and agency within our populace? It sounds big, but why not have a big thing?
No, and to find that community of people that are interested in these ideas and exploring these things for themselves. I look forward to the day when we get some good pushback on some things we've said, where it's that is, hey, you said this, but did you think about it this way?
Yeah.
That's the day that I'm looking forward to most, is seeing that comment on a video somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, huh, no, I didn't. That's a great idea. Let me look into that. Because that's when I grow the most, is when I'm challenged and don't take it defensively, and just take it openly and try to process it and come out with okay, from that viewpoint, how do I feel? If I still feel the same way after thinking about it, then okay, no, I don't care to accept that argument, but maybe I do. You know, I've changed my mind several times in the last week on things like that. So
Yeah, totally. Totally. Or you can be more confident in the ideas that you hold because someone has gone and challenged them, and it's not because you got defensive or dug in, it's because the idea has been even more illuminated than it was.
mm-hmm. Yes, you know, it stands up to that test, right? It's
Correct.
like
I have considered a whole nother angle.
I have a hypothesis. I've tested at least one null theory against it, and just keep bringing the theories that you might think disprove it, and you end up with much stronger ideas ultimately, and shaped much differently than you would think.
Yep,
I'll say that.
So that's the lens that we're trying to be mindful of when we come and think of different topics. But I would imagine it's wide ranging. I think part of Sean and I's relationship is just general curiosity. And so we like to play with ideas. We like to go and experiment, and we like to challenge in the interest of getting better, how and what we're thinking about. So we'll still probably do the philosophical sidebars and the what about asymptotic society questions and all that kind of stuff, because we enjoy them terribly. But I think they're directly connected to our way of life and trying to understand it, and always paying attention not only to the on the ground tactical stuff like microecon, but also keeping an ear toward the dismal science, if you will, of macroecon, right?
Dismal science indeed.
Yeah.
Science feels generous.
Well, is it just that science and math can't get to complex chaotic systems? Because once you move into macro, that's very much it.
Well, that and science and math can't get into
like if we go
behavioral psychology.
Well, if we go quantum, then maybe we can figure it out. Because I think a lot of macro is sort of like Schrodinger's cat. It's like until you've gone and looked at it, is it dead or is it alive? You don't know.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of things that are just built on pure faith that something can change. Something can change, and people just all of a sudden start behaving a different way for no necessarily real good reason, just that they all are pretty sure it's the right thing to do, and that changes the outcome, right?
It was like the vibe shift at the start of this year. Like, that's why I got excited. It felt good. And it's like, if we could have kept that ramp going, cool. But I think the ramp is in the other direction now.
Yeah. Well, it seems to have stabilized lately. So this week was fairly stable. But I think we are in the eye of the storm, so to speak.
I agree. That's exactly how, after some conversations I had with people, I felt like eye of the storm, because they have absolutely no idea they're in the middle of a hurricane. But it's coming. Yeah. Because all the orders to China that should be being put in for Christmas usually happen right now, and they're
not happening.
So expect empty Christmas trees or $1,600 Nintendo Switches. And that's not because of tariffs. That'll be because of demand and supply imbalances. Probably an exaggeration, but directionally accurate.
I have to imagine that there are orders that are perhaps being made with the anticipation of future deals that will probably prevent some fall through on some of this, but a lot of it, there might not be certain things as easily available as usual later on this year, because the orders
don't exist.
Industrial orders have absolutely slowed down. Fallen off 60% or something of that nature. It is, I think, the number I saw,
which is a massive ISM number.
Yeah.
Mr. Trini I had a whole piece maybe this is, I can't remember. I meant to ask you, like you had recommended last time we met, like one of Citrini's pieces, and I can't remember which one it was.
It was kind of an older one. I was pulling back up. It was like from 2020. I'm like, I thought this was recent, but he just reposted it recently because he said this is current again. So that's
current again. Yeah. Great. I love it when history repeats. Maybe. No, there was not. Yeah, recent one, or maybe I got
Mm-hmm.
no. This is one kind of recapping his 1 week in the United States visiting factories and business owners, 1 week in China visiting factories and business owners, and
Oh, I
it was
haven't
a
looked at
very
that
good.
one yet.
It's good,
Okay.
illuminating.
Okay.
Being able to go to China and see like factories just going like, I don't know, there aren't a whole lot of orders, which kind of confirms the whole like we're going to screw China side of it. But at the same time, it's like, do you know what kind of pain is going to be on this side? Like, it's just delayed. You think you just won, but like the American consumer is going to be having a fit in not too distant future. And the American consumer is the voter, so
Mm-hmm.
murky, hard to see the future.
Well, I don't. Does he care about the voter anymore? Like, why does he care about the voter? What
Yeah,
they
no, I mean
think?
he's
There's
king,
there's there's no need to have an opinion on it from his standpoint. I think in many ways, I think it probably bugs him if he's not well liked.
Yeah.
But other than it bugging him, there's not functionally anything. Who gives a shit? Oh no, bad poll numbers.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some part of me that's like the ego is so strong. I have a hard time believing that he's going to be able to brush it off for length.
That's true.
For now,
That's true.
sure, but length, I'm not. I don't know. I've been saying this to like anybody who has open ears. I'm like, you're dealing with a society with 4,000 years of history of a willingness to kill and maim tens of millions of its own people in service of a goal. And you think we are going to be able to, endure more pain than them? I think you should re-examine that lens, right? And then trying to examine that lens through, can Donald Trump, just the one person, endure the kind of necessary pain? I'm like, I don't think so. He wants to be loved and admired, and I don't think this is a path to doing that. Like, it may be on a 20-year time scale, it is a path to that, but he's not going to be alive in 20 years. Supposedly there'll be elections in less time, so
In theory, I think there's supposed to be one in about 3 years and 9 months or so.
are you counting?
I'd actually be 3 years and 6 months now. Yeah. No, I'm not really thinking about it yet.
Yeah, me neither. Just trying to live for today.
Yeah, it's we got more of this coming through. It's just chaos, right? It's we're going to be dealing with chaos for
Yeah, I mean, if you go
bit.
back and listen to several of our episodes, we talk about the chaos monkeys and throwing grenades in the room, and how like some of this could be welcome and healthy, and but there's also like the whole shrapnel that I blew up that room and didn't mean to, and stuff like that. So that's why I keep coming back to these words like murky, and it's not all bad, but there are localities of thought that I fall into.
Yeah, I find myself getting into some worst case spirals more lately, and although I guess maybe because things quieted down, I felt a little less I don't know, a little more hopeful about it this week for some reason. But I think because it's like, okay, they're backing off. At least they're making moves in a direction that seems better, so it's not stagnant, right?
Yeah.
It didn't every things are still changing and it's chaotic. So at least it's good that we know that we don't know, is what I'll say. Because if we knew it was what it is right now, that would be very bad.
Yeah,
But I
agreed.
think
Yeah.
it's good that we
No, I
know
would
that
just
we
throw in
don't
the
know.
towel.
Like,
I'd be like, we're done here.
yeah,
The math doesn't work.
yeah, like this is like, okay, this is still ongoing. This is going to be ongoing for a while, and I think we're going to be in a state of, I expect these whatever's left of the 90 days to be very chaotic, and lots of
Unpredictability.
lots of unpredictable news that will have impacts that we won't know really fully how they're going to shake out for another 6 months. And I think, from the entrepreneurial aspect, this stuff impacts you a lot more directly than
Yeah.
Like, this is in your day to day. This is impacting your day to day a lot more directly than perhaps a lot of people.
Literally affects whether I can feed my kids or not.
Yeah. If you're in education, this is talked about, but I don't think it's necessarily impacting their day to day outside of things that would be available to purchase.
A lot of people with just regular jobs think it's whatever. That's the picture I'm getting as I talk to people. It's just like, and that's why I go back to the eye of the storm, right? Like, I think if things stay where they are or get worse, I'm thankful that I'll declare bankruptcy and completely start my life from zero over again. And I'll have like a 1 year head start of most W-2 employees who are on their way to getting laid off. That's my worst case lens of like,
Yeah.
I at least can be sprinting and will have been for a
You said it
while
so optimistically, Dan.
because I get to be ahead.
I was like, this sounds terrible, but he says it with it's such an upbeat tone.
At least
I'm
I'm moving.
impressed.
I
Yeah.
like moving rather than not moving.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, this is one situation where I think being an entrepreneur puts you a little bit on the, the cutting edge or the saber's edge of what's happening. And for me, working in basic manufacturing here in the States, it's easy to see that it's going to impact us. And I know that we're looking at, new work at our facility that, should be, good for our local facility in theory. But at the same time, we also feel extremely uncertain about what that volume
Can
of
you
work
even
is going to
spend that
be.
money? Yeah. Do you
And
want the balance sheet to go down?
yeah, yeah. So I will say strategically, we are. It seems from a high level corporate strategic standpoint, saying we're probably need to spend some money here to do some
That's
retooling.
positive.
Yeah.
I
So
think
it's
because I feel like there's a whole, at least in my mind, there's a whole lot of freeze rather than action. And which freeze hurts everything.
now, yeah. Now the scope, the level of that spending might be very subdued, but there will be some
Yeah.
allowance, or at least we're working on. But let's be honest, it's April. 2025 or 2026 capital budgets are due in October. Like, we're starting to think about what needs to go into those now. So this is a lot of the things we're doing now won't really even roll out and fully be implemented till in 2026, 2027 in some cases, because it's
That's
going
why
to
I
take
think
a while.
Ken Griffin's comment about 20% is so interesting because, like, if you just look at today, and I think there'd be probably a lot of people that would hear a clip like that and be like, "What's that guy know? 20%? Like, I just bought a new grill. Things are good, baby." And when in fact, it's about the empty Christmas tree coming. That's months away. It's about corporate planning about 2026, which is happening now, and the completely pull back spending and investment cycle that takes another year or two to turn around and spin back up if things were to just magically be quote unquote better today, right? It's like you buckle up for 1 to 2 years of depressed economic activity because of what's happening today, even though you might feel like today nothing has changed. We're winning, air quotes.
Because there's headlines and people are, to some people the chaos looks like good and probably like winning, because it's like, oh, I have a particular viewpoint on China, and I think that we should be moving away from China in their head, and these are steps to do that. So this feels like, oh, we're taking the actions to do that.
Another comment I heard was Biden didn't do anything, which made me think, one, you weren't paying attention, and two, because it didn't seem to be a comment about disagreement. It was more just like, well, nothing was getting done, so why have that person in the job? Which I can understand to some degree. But so here we have this, we have the kid riding the bicycle and putting the stick in the spoke. So that's better.
Yeah, he did something.
That's what I had difficulty with. I was like, we're doing bad things, so doing bad things is better than. But then again, I'm putting all of my opinions right on top of that.
Yeah. There's plenty that can be sussed out and separated. I think.
Yeah. To be more nuanced, like if I'm asking for better, more tactical, nuanced economic policy, I can do the same for my delivery of my opinions and ideas.
Exactly.
Should we leave it there?
I think we should leave it there. Let's leave it on.
And we're gonna do our best to not talk tariffs and politics next episode. I promise it'll be on my mind though.
I'm not promising shit. Yeah, it's who knows.
We'll
might
have a whole economic roundup to have to talk about because of all the changes.
It's exciting times.
Never dull.
All right.
This is what people wanted: amusing ourselves to death. Right?
Yeah.
Now
Yes.
we have
right.
something to pay attention to. We have been split on the cheering squad. We're now at a football stadium with one side wearing blue, one side wearing red.
It's game day, baby.
Yeah, and then we've got a team on field. that's actually doing stuff.
Get your tailgate set up in the parking lot. Get your freedom fries or your French fries, and let's go. Well, thanks for tuning in this week, everybody. We appreciate it as always. We'll catch you next time on another episode of Unqualified Advice.